Hi, this is Brass Check, and we're recording this on July 6th, Tuesday, 2021. And we continue with our original programming. We used to research and find interesting videos to share with people to give historical context for the things that were going on in the present. But the total, near total collapse of the world of journalism, left, right, center, progressive, up, down, uh, has been so complete over this COVID con that we've had to get into the original reporting and analysis business. It's pretty labor intensive, but it's fun too. Um, if you're new to us, you should really explore the site. You're going to be kind of amazed at how ahead of the curve we've been. Our first notice about the COVID con was February 1st, 2020. And we noticed that the stories coming out of China made absolutely no sense. And we just took it from there. And unlike Tony Fauci, who's had to change his story and his version of events every 5 seconds, pretty much everything that we've said starting in February and continuing relentlessly throughout this whole thing has turned out to be true. We don't really have to change a word of anything we've said. That's kind of interesting. Anyway, we did a show recently about who really owns these propaganda outlets: Fox, CNN, NBC, Yahoo, Time Magazine. And it's interesting that they are either completely involved in the pharmacy scam, and Google, of course, sinister Google. They're either directly involved in the pharmaceutical vaccine business, as is Murdoch, who owns Fox, as is the owner of Time Magazine. His company, Salesforce.com, just happened to create the software suite that manages the mass vaccination programs all over the world. How's that for convenience? But then you have the media companies, the other media companies, CNN and NBC and Yahoo, and everybody thinks those companies are what they are. Just, oh yeah, it's NBC, right? It's CNN, right? It's Yahoo, right? No. CNN is owned by AT&T. Comcast is owned by NBC is owned by Comcast. Yahoo is owned by Verizon. So they had strong motivation because of their G5. Hey, we're going to get censored, even if I reverse the acronym, because of their massive G5 rollout that just coincidentally took place during the lockdowns. That was just a coincidence, folks. Nothing to see. Move along. That is, sort of like, you create a distraction on the left side of the stage, and something else is going on the right side of the stage. So keep in mind that Comcast, AT&T, and Verizon, big players in telecom, big players in G5, who will report nothing about G5 except how glorious it is, have also been the stage managers of the COVID con reporting. But wait, there's more. Who owns AT&T? Who owns Comcast? Who owns Verizon? See, these are things good Americans are not supposed to ask. You're supposed to turn on that boob tube and think that the talking heads are independent journalists, well informed and operating in the interest of Americans. No, not quite. CNN is owned by AT&T, and AT&T is owned by a lot of big funds. Vanguard, which is a mutual fund company, brokerage house, they own a lot. But then there's this other company called BlackRock. And BlackRock is a major shareholder of AT&T. They have about 7%. Now that may not sound like a lot. That's a lot. To own 7%, to be the second biggest shareholder of a corporation like AT&T and own 7% of the shares, that's a lot. And who owns 7% of the shares of Comcast, which owns NBC? That wouldn't be BlackRock, would it? And who's the second biggest owner of shares of Verizon that owns Yahoo? That wouldn't be BlackRock, would it? Oh, yes, it would. And Warren Buffett owns a lot of Verizon, too. Warren Buffett, that's the best friend forever of Bill Gates. Yeah, yeah. So that's how that works. And right below, we're going to post a little, what do you call it? Panel discussion featuring Mark Benioff, owner of Salesforce.com, employer of Peter Schwartz, author of the Rockefeller Foundation Lockstep Scenario, also the futurist guru, tech genius, who advises Mark Benioff. He formerly was an intelligence officer with Royal Dutch Shell, something that he used to proudly admit. I don't know if that's something he wants to talk about anymore. Anyway, that fellow is also on this panel, along with the CEO of BlackRock. Isn't that interesting? And also on that panel is Klaus, what's his name? Schwab. Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, also known as Davos. And if you're not familiar with Klaus, he and Fauci and Bill Gates are the most essential people in promoting the COVID con, and he is the guru to Mark Benioff, who is the employer to Peter Schwartz and just happens to own Time Magazine. Do you see how all this works? So anyway, we're going to put a link to that panel with comments from the CEO of BlackRock so you can see what he has to say about how the world should be run. And Klaus is on that panel if you want to watch the whole thing, and Mark Benioff is on that panel, and a government official of Canada, which was the country only second to Cuba. And shame that Cuba lost its mind over COVID. It really did. But Canada's only second to Cuba on this planet for absolute COVID insanity. And so we have to have a Canadian public official telling us how the world should be run. So if you're interested in seeing what these people look like and what they say when they think they're just talking to their friends, you can watch that and see. There's something else I want to talk about. We've done a lot of recent material on Alan Dulles and how it looks absolutely crystal clear that Alan Dulles was directly involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And we kind of know that because he was the best friend of George Mohrenschildt, who was the guy, the royal descendant from royalty, multimillionaire, high-in-demand petroleum engineer who for some odd reason in 1962 decided to basically be the unpaid personal assistant of an unknown non-entity named Lee Harvey Oswald. And we can pretty much guess that Alan Dulles put George on that job for two reasons. Alan Dulles did everything he could and was very successful until this last year, in obscuring the fact that he and de Mohrenschildt knew each other for decades. In fact, he knew George de Mohrenschildt when he was a little boy. And they were involved in some COVID operations. They were involved in shipping oil to the Nazis via Vichy, France, in the run-up to World War II. They were also involved in hiding the existence of the largest oil field in all of Southeast Asia. So these guys weren't just bridge partners, okay? They knew each other very well. So if you try to figure out, well, why would George de Mohrenschildt suddenly become the unpaid personal assistant to a guy who was a non-entity? Who would have had the juice to get that kind of favor from George de Mohrenschildt? Well, that would be Alan Dulles, and the fact that Alan Dulles successfully hid that relationship from the Warren Commission, even from the the House Assassinations Committee that did their work in the 70s, they didn't have a clue. They missed the ultimate piece of information. Now, what's so shocking about this is that Allen Dulles had been director of the CIA, I think up until 61 when Kennedy fired him, and he certainly was head of the CIA under Eisenhower. And of course, he loved coups, he loved assassinations, he was involved in all of them. And I think it's shocking to people that the former head of the CIA would have been involved in the assassination of a U.S. president. And it's not so shocking when you realize what the CIA really is. You know how the FDA is supposed to be an independent federal agency that protects Americans from bad food and bad drugs, and actually doesn't turn out to do those things at all, and actually paves the way for garbage in our food and an out of control pharma industry? Isn't that funny how that works, huh? Well, that's because the FDA is a joke. It was founded as a joke. It was founded by the food and drug industry to take care of its interests. Okay. Now, it's a government agency to the degree that we pay for it. We pay all those salaries. We pay all those pensions. We pay for the air conditioning and the pencils and we pay all the expenses. But they don't work for us. They never have. See how that works? That's just one government agency, and there's many that operate that way. But the CIA, oh my God, they have never worked on our behalf. And how do we know that? Well, we just look at what they do, but we also look at who founded it. CIA had the forerunner of the OSS, the daring do guys, the most amazing guys ever, and fair enough, we were fighting the Nazis. Of course, some of the people involved with the OSS were actually, and the founders of the OSS were actually Nazi sympathizers, but that's a little too complicated. We don't want to confuse people. But yeah, we were fighting an all-out war, and we were training local people to be saboteurs, and they were engaged in sabotage and suicide and assassination. It was war. Okay. Unfortunately, those mechanisms after the war were adopted as an instrument of everyday U.S. foreign policy as administered by the Central Intelligence Agency, which is the descendant of the OSS. Okay, so this is so transparently obvious, and it's hard for me to understand why this isn't constantly discussed every time the CIA is mentioned. Where was the OSS's office during World War II in the United States? It was in Rockefeller Center. Who ran the OSS? A guy who'd been an attorney for Standard Oil. Who did Allen Dulles, who was head of CIA for many years, and he's so revered by the CIA that they have a little plaque to him right in the lobby? Allen Dulles. So just so you understand, the CIA was founded by Standard Oil to protect and the Rockefellers and that whole circle of people, to protect their interests. Now, it's like the FDA, it's a government agency in that we pay the salaries, we pay the pensions, we pay the rent on all the buildings, and all the, the plane trips they take, and all the things they own, and the cars, and the safe houses, and the hooker. I mean, all the stuff that they're involved in. We pay for all that. But they're not working for us. They never have worked for us. And just the way the FDA is sort of this revolving door, one day you're working for the FDA, the next day you're working for Monsanto, and it just goes round and round and round, and it's basically a self-enrichment program for the higher ups and the agents of the FDA and these food and drug corporations. CIA is the same way. Same way. All kinds of opportunities for private enterprise. Have we forgotten Oliver North and all the drug dealing that the CIA was involved in Central America? Have we forgotten Gary Webb's reporting on that? And then we've done interviews with Douglas Valentine about the fact that this is standard operating procedure for the CIA and pre-CIA, going back to the turn of the century. Drugs have always been a part of elite business. Those clipper ships that we romanticize, they were designed to get opium from India to China fast and do a quick turnaround. A lot of the great original fortunes, New England fortunes in this country, when they weren't based on slavery, they were based on drug running, opium running to China, the Cabots, the lodges. And what do you think that secret society at Yale is all about? Skull and Bones. Those people were all the original founders. That was all drug money people. So if you just take the fog away and just look at the reality of these organizations, but especially since we're talking about the CIA and we're talking about how could it possibly be that a former director of the CIA would be directly involved in the assassination of a U.S. president, just realize they don't work for us. They've never worked for us. And the people that run the place, I'm sure a lot of people that work for them think they're doing great things, and they might accidentally be doing great things. But the people at the top, they're not interested in doing anything but advancing the cause of the people who founded the thing in the first place. And it's not a coincidence that the Rockefeller Foundation commissioned a former oil industry spook, Peter Schwartz, to write the lockstep scenario. That's just not a coincidence. So anyway, full circle, when you watch an NBC or CNN or Fox, you're really watching a guy that's in bed with GlaxoSmithKline, the biggest vaccination marketer in the UK. When you're watching CNN, you're really watching AT&T, which is really run by BlackRock, really owned by BlackRock. When you're watching NBC, you're really watching Comcast, which is really owned by BlackRock. And everything on Yahoo is filtered by the business office at Verizon, and I'm sure they are following the unspoken directives of BlackRock. So below we've got some reference videos if you want to go deeper into this. So this is Brass Check. If you're a subscriber, thank you, and a supporting subscriber, thank you very much. If you are not a supporting subscriber, where else are you getting news and analysis like this? CNN and NBC and Fox and Yahoo and Time Magazine will be glad to give you all the free journalism you can handle. But if you actually want to know what's going on in the United States, you're getting it from very few places these days. I mean, we lost a huge number of journalists just disappeared, voluntarily during the COVID con. I mean, they couldn't join the COVID con fast enough. I'd say about 95% of people that had been successfully, credibly masquerading as incisive thinkers, they're gone. So there's just not a whole lot of news left, and we are one of the sources. And that's that. So thanks to the supporters, and if you're not a supporter, you might think about doing so. Thank you.